know traffic's bad, so we'll see how many people it's going to affect. But we do want to start. I'm on the board of the Public Bank East Bay. We're going to be having a presentation, but first let me give just a few housekeeping details. The bathroom is on the other side of the stairs there. There's food, vegetarian and meat. And after the presentation, which Bhairavi will give, George is going to facilitate the Q&A. And if you need a mic, Bhairavi will be going around to give you one, so you can be heard. And also, we're going to be filming it, not the Q&A, but the presentation, so we'll really only see the back of your heads. But if you're uncomfortable, you can sit at the table over there and nobody will take your picture. So it's totally up to you. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to introduce Bhairavi. Woo!
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us here today at our June community event here at CoBiz. Thank you CoBiz for having us. This is our third event in our community education series, and we're so excited to have you guys here today and share a little bit more about public banking. So for today's agenda, we'll be going over what public banking really is, the problem with our current financial system, the solution that we can find within public banks, as well as the priorities of public banks, a little bit more context, and our strategy moving forward. So who are we? We're the Friends of Public Bank East Bay. We're a 501c3 volunteer-led movement founded about a decade ago, 2016, and our advocacy and education efforts are focused on establishing a regional public bank to keep our money local. In other words, establishing the first public bank in over 100 years here in the East Bay. And a little bit more about myself. My name is Bhairavi. I joined Public Bank East Bay last August, and ever since then have been part of the advocacy and communications committees and helping put on events just like these so we can all learn a little bit more about public banking. So, what is a public bank? It's a financial institution that's owned by public entities like cities and regions and puts our public money, meaning the taxes and fees that we already pay to our governments, to work for our community needs. Public Bank East Bay would serve Alameda, Contra Costa, and Solana County. And the three investment areas that we've highlighted, and it's also research-backed, is workforce housing, local small business, and the clean energy infrastructure. So, what's the problem with the current financial system? We've highlighted three, and the first of which is it blocks local investment. For example, we can take affordable housing development projects. These often require over a dozen different funding sources, meaning that developers often have to rely on mega banks to provide the loans that they need. But these mega banks have slow approval timelines and processes that stall building and construction costs, inflating costs over time. We can see this with the city of Oakland in 2020 having spent over $60 million in just debt servicing fees, which accounted for 6% of their city's total expenditures for that year, and that was just on the annual basis. The current financial system also restricts affordable credits to communities that are underserved. Profit-driven banks treat small loans to underserved borrowers in low return and high risk. So they charge more, lend less, or just disinvest entirely, often leaving those in undersourced communities without the money that they need. We can see a lot of this really affects the playing field that we have for development, with a lot of small businesses and affordable housing proponents really struggling to get the funding that they need on time. By the time that they do get it, costs are inflated, and a lot of the times the big hedge funds swoop up and really have a large playing hand in the real estate development, buying up land and businesses. So we can see with a public bank, this would just help even out the playing field and ensure that small businesses and affordable housing developers really can get their home set in the game. The current financial system is also a waste of our taxpayer dollars. Wall Street banks prioritize maximizing shareholder profits, putting our money into fossil fuels, the private prison system, and also into wars overseas, instead of local needs. With a public bank, we can really ensure that the money stays local and into needs identified by the community. Public banks are a solution. They're community-owned. Like schools, fire departments, and the parks near us, public banks are owned by cities, counties, and states to serve public needs. They're also independently governed. They're professionally managed by financial experts with oversight from community members, bankers, and elected officials beholden to us and our interests. They're also lean and efficient. Unlike big Wall Street banks, they don't have ATMs, retail branches, nor do they have to focus on the marketing costs that are natural for larger Wall Street banks. So they operate as wholesale bankers banks with low overhead costs, ensuring that costs are kept lower overall. They also have a not-for-profit mission. Public banks recirculate funds locally, creating a multiplier effect that amplifies community investments, with every $1 in capital recirculating $10 into the community and increasing the taxpayer base. So what sets community banks apart? They provide cheaper financing for cities. Public banks involve lower borrowing costs and fees, allowing tax dollars to flow more efficiently through projects. They also strengthen local partnerships. They work alongside local lenders to expand access to affordable credit, stimulating local businesses. Public banks are actually legally mandated in California to work with CDFIs like community banks and credit unions, ensuring that they work together to provide credit lines to communities that need them. It also builds community resilience. Especially in times like these, by reducing dependence on state and federal funding, public banks strengthen local economic stability, which is more important than ever right now. And this is a little infographic about the private versus public banking system. So we can see first that with the current system, residents give their taxes to the government, and the government invests this into Wall Street. Wall Street then gambles this money onto derivatives, speculation, and stock market, in which the returns rarely and barely go back to the communities that they originated from. Whereas, we can see the public banking system, residents pay taxes to the government, which later deposits these into public banks, which then lends out the money through these back into the local economy, which then really just returns profits from these back to the government, and also creates more jobs and really expands the tax base to ensure that the money continues its flow throughout the community and within the needs that are identified by the bank that are really beholden to our residents' needs. And we have the little red circles kind of pointing out how it goes. Okay, perfect. So to focus on our loan priority number 1, financing affordable and workforce housing. As we mentioned before, developers and land trusts really struggle to secure the funding they need in time to build affordable housing, leaving low-income renters without access to stable housing. Public Bank East Bay can help fill these funding gaps by brokering creative lending solutions, including support for land trusts, with big traditional banks inherently distressed and don't put that much money towards. Our second loan priority, providing small business loans. By partnering with local CDFIs, community banks, and credit unions, public banks share risk, expanding lending power and support small businesses. PBEB's model can alleviate the significant barriers that many BIPOC, women, and other underserved small business owners face when accessing financing, fostering more inclusive growth throughout the Bay Area. Our third loan priority, underwriting green energy infrastructure. With California's ambitious climate goals, the East Bay faces a projected demand of $300+ million for financing renewable energy projects, like building electrification and green energy infrastructure. Public Bank East Bay can help meet this demand by providing the necessary capital for these initiatives and work with partnering financial institutions to maximize funding for the clean energy transition. Public banking works, and we have a proof of concept. The Bank of North Dakota, America's 100-year-old public bank. Although it's the only public bank in America, it is important to note that over a third of the world's money is held in public banks, with over $40 trillion held in other international and other countries' systems. So we see the state-run Bank of North Dakota was established in 1919 and it shows how public banks can really consistently generate strong returns and community benefits. So it achieved a 15.8% return on investment in 2024, providing $335 million profit back to the state. It also outperformed all the other states during the 2008 financial crisis without any federal bailouts. And during the COVID epidemic, it distributed Paycheck Protection Program loans more effectively than any other state. It also weathered government shutdowns and natural disasters with resilience. For example, during our last government partial shutdown, it was able to actually pay back all of its TSA agents through its special unique loan program that it was able to fund as a public bank. California's public banking framework. So California Public Banking Act, established in 2019, really sets the tone for how public banking in California can work from here forward and what we're trying to achieve as a coalition. So it's a grassroots victory that was led by the California Public Banking Alliance, and it's the first in the state that enables municipalities to establish their own public banks. Under the law, public banks operate as not-for-profit, tax-exempt institutions designed to reduce costs, strengthen local economies, support community development, and address infrastructural and housing needs. And just like every other bank, it must be regulated and insured by state and federal agencies, ensuring its stability over time. So for our 2026 strategy, we're focusing on capitalizing and ensuring this public bank can come into fruition. The minimum capitalization the Friends of Public Bank East Bay envisions will sustain the bank is $40 million. And for context, again, we just paid $63 million in debt interest in 2020 just for ensuring that we pay back the loans in time for these mega banks, and which is $20 million more than it'll take for the minimum capitalization of the bank to ensure that its loans rest over time. And this bank capital is separate from bank deposits, and it stays in the bank to cover any losses. And it also must be committed prior to applying to the regulators for a charter. So paths to capitalization. First, ensuring the city puts the city budget set-asides work for a public bank. Cities can help seed a bank by allocating portions of their budgets towards the long-term community benefits a public bank delivers. And we already have the city of Richmond pledging to set aside money for the bank, and we're hoping that other cities can follow suit. Philanthropic capital. Individual donors and philanthropic institutions are also a key early source, especially considering the difficulties with getting a lot of cities to hop on board. And that limits direct initial government contributions. Ballot measures. Through successful advocacy, measures can generate substantial capital and also build public support, an approach we are actively pursuing and we're seeing on the ballot this November, so it's exciting to see that in the city of Berkeley. And then legislative clarification. As the 2019 legislation still has areas of ambiguity referring to the California Public Banking Act we saw a few slides ago, clarifying it can directly address how exactly city funds can be used in forming a bank in terms of its capitalization, opening up a new source of funding that we haven't been able to tap into yet. In summary, Public Bank East Bay can lower borrowing costs for Oakland, Richmond, Berkeley, and many other Alameda County, Contra Costa, and Solana counties, strengthening the local economy through a financial multiplier effect, and building resilience against federal funding challenges. It will support housing development, clean energy projects, and women and BIPOC-owned businesses. Backed by widespread support, Public Bank East Bay is a powerful tool for community-first growth. So how can you support the movement? From here, we call on you to volunteer, educate, and advocate. For volunteering, we would gladly have you join the coalition. Please lend your expertise within our advocacy, fundraising, communications, and onboarding committees. Through our diverse set of communities, you can help as needed and help whether it's philanthropic mobilization, helping advocate, or even just with communications and marketing-centered work. We also be glad to come and host a tailored Public Banking 101 presentation at your organization or your circle, where we can provide more detailed information about public banks tailored to what exactly you'd want to see a public bank provide for your community. And we also urge you to advocate, talk to elected officials, express your interest as a constituent as to why a public bank for your city is more important than ever. And thank you to some of our supporters that we here have listed. And thank you for your time, and we'd be more than happy to take any questions. We also ask you to scan the QR code to keep up to date and join our newsletter. And also feel free to follow us on our Instagram and email us with any questions, especially about volunteering. I'll hand it off to George to lead the Q&A and answer any of your questions right now.
Thank you again. Hopefully that's a lot of information to consume in such a short period, 15 minutes, I don't know. So in some ways, there are normal questions that they have, and folks, please feel free, to reach out. Myself and a few others here from our organization are here to answer any questions that you may have about the bank.
How far are you folks along in raising that minimum capitalization of 40 million?
So, as I was noted, if you could put the slide up back up the slides. If you could back up the slides to the strategy. So right now, we have looked at municipal allocation, and we mentioned that the city of Richmond has allocated $750,000 to this project. So we are working with the city of Berkeley, in which there is a ballot measure that is going to be there in November. That in total will raise about 55, I'm sorry, 63, where it came from, but $55 million, but over a 6-year period. And we're continually looking at the philanthropic side of the house, in which large institutions can provide funds through the local municipalities, because this needs to be public monies that needs to be delivered. And so there are some logistical and legal frameworks that need to be understood in order to deliver that. But as of right now, the ballot measure, which is coming in November, and Richmond's funding is where we're at right now.
Okay, thank you.
I have 2 questions. My first is when it comes to small businesses, when you're figuring out who and where to allocate money in the initial stages, how do you, especially when so many small businesses have different needs, how do you kind of identify which money goes first?
So again, the notion of our outreach, I think that's definitely going to be one of the bank's biggest roles, to kind of advertise to the community in its existence once it's chartered. But we're working through local financial institutions as well that have presence in the community, and we're going to be working through them and to do the outreach, to find out you've received requests, applications from local small businesses that you weren't able to fulfill. Let's take a look at that. Let's understand that and see if we can help with that distribution of funds to those. But it is the role of the public bank to make sure the community knows it exists, that there is funding sources, and part of, if it's education that needs to happen, if it's in some ways a partial, how should I say, funding, kind of finding funding sources from different financial institutions to bring those funds to the local small businesses that are asking for. That's the job of the public bank. But again, I myself, I failed to introduce myself. My name is George Quay. I'm on the board of the Friends of the Public Banking Space as well. I'm not a banker. I'm a volunteer, and we're looking to build this institution, be run by bankers. But we outlined the 3 main goals, and the board of the bank and the folks that are in charge of actually running the bank, they're going to be using that, those goals as a way to drive the work that they're doing. But as well, the community is out there that needs to keep them accountable.
George, I would just add one thing to that about outreach, which is we flipped pretty, my name is Debbie, I'm the chair of the Friends of the Public Banking Space. We flipped pretty quickly past that slide of supporters, but many of them are grassroots community organizations. And one of the things that we count on is having all of our partners reaching out to all of their circles and saying, are you taking advantage of this new opportunity for money? So it's community driven, as well as being accountable to the community, it also relies on the community.
I'm trying to understand what happens with the $40 million. So however you cobble it together, where does it sit? Do people receive interest on it? It's my understanding, it sounds like it has to be there as a backup security for the duration of the bank.
It is the $40 million, which we call capitalization, which is different from the deposits.
I can't hear you. I don't know if that mic is working.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay. The capitalization, which is different than deposits, are meant to be used to run the bank itself, pay the employees, manage any losses in their portfolio. So, but that money, is meant to stay with the bank.
Right.
So that's how the bank is going to be run. And the idea then is the deposits will be coming from, so we're starting with Oakland, Berkeley, and City of Richmond, and Alameda County itself, but City of Livermore, or any other city could deposit funds into the bank. And those deposits will be used as the funding sources for lending.
Well, I'm talking about the capitalization. So do the people who put up the money for capitalization receive any kind of interest for the time it's sitting there supporting the company?
So the question is essentially where is the return on investment?
Well, I'm curious, is there?
Well, the idea is it could be, but it's a responsibility of the bank when it's developing its business plan to outline how the municipalities will be granted shares in the bank, and those funds, how that's going to be distributed. Retained earnings are going to be held and distributed, but as well, part of the mandate of the bank is to demonstrate growth within the community. That's the part of the return on investment that's expected. But long term, the expectation is that the bank will grow, and there will be a return to the local municipalities that capitalize the bank.
Don't you need to tell them what that looks like before you start asking them for money?
George, I'll take that.
I mean, if you want them
It is the
to
nature
put up-
of bank capitalization that you cannot promise a return on investment. All the banks you deal with are capitalized by rich, let's say, white men, and there are probably some exceptions to the white and men, but banks are capitalized by rich people who don't necessarily worry about return on investment. So what the conversation that we are having is twofold. One is what's called impact investment. You're putting your money in to see the change you believe in. And the other is long-term actual ROI. If we were a quarter as successful as the Bank of North Dakota, everybody would get their money back in 10 years with interest. And you can write the loan documents or the deposit documents in such a way as to say, if the bank makes money, this percentage of it will go to the people who put the money in. But you cannot, by the definition of how banking works in the United States and most of the Western world, you cannot say, but you will get 3% or any number like that, because it depends on how the bank does. Does that answer your question?
So you're saying that essentially people who put in money for the capitalization are making a loan to the bank?
Are making a gift to the bank that may have financial returns in the future.
So if it's usually rich white men, I mean, most cities aren't really rich, so is it realistic to expect money from cities?
Well, see, I think we should, after this, we should take this conversation offline and I'll talk to you afterwards. But cities are not rich, but $40 million to a city is nothing like $40 million to you or me. We met with the mayor of Berkeley last year, and she said to me, you know, $40 million is a lot of money, and it's not. And that's exactly correct. So, you know, cities aren't rich, but almost all cities of any size have $10 to $15 million sitting around in unspent funds in their budget if they wanted to go look for them. We'll call it at that.
Please go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation. My name is Vinita Goel. I'm with an organization that is partnering with the public practice.
I don't think that might work.
Oh,
All right, I want to hear from you.
my name is Vinita Goel. I work for an organization and we are working with Debbie and some of the colleagues. My question is more about, could you talk about your outreach strategy to Richmond? What worked? What convinced the city to put in some resources towards the bank so that we can learn from that and mobilize that more with other cities?
Great.
Debbie, do you want to take this?
I can try. I think the problem is, I think really the answer is that Richmond is a wonderful progressive city. And the Richmond Progressive Alliance was on our side. The mayor, the now outgoing mayor, Mayor Martinez, is a big supporter of the public bank. Both of the likely incoming mayors are big supporters of the public bank. We had the wind in our sails in Richmond, and of course Richmond is also now looking at a lot more money than that in settlement money from the agreement they made with Chevron, and we are certainly making serious attempts to get some capitalization funds out of that money. But it seems to me to be a matter, first, of finding your allies, and second, of finding some way to disarm your opposition. Because we have allies in every jurisdiction that we work closely with, but particularly in the county of Alameda, we've run into some pretty formidable people who don't want it to happen and are in a position to make obstacles. So it's a question of working out the politics of dealing with those people as much as anything. Because what I think about public banks is they're a no-brainer. There really isn't any reason not to have them. It's not partisan. There is a public bank application now in Florida for basically a MAGA public bank, which is kind of a horrifying idea, but it also tells you how it can work, right? You need to get past the risk averseness of political people and the opposition to the big banks. Those are the two big obstacles that I see.
Thank you.
I mean, each of the cities and the Alameda County itself has contributed funds over the years in support of our organization in developing a business plan for the public bank itself. And as well, there have been resolutions that have been passed by multiple councils, Oakland, Berkeley, and here in Richmond, in support of the public bank. So the political, at least demonstration of support exists in each of these. But when it came down to, thinking about the capitalization, because the path forward requires a promise to deliver a check. And that promise itself needs to be a resolution passed by the cities. And with that, we attach it to the application, and that begins the process of starting to look at developing the public bank, because we have to then go and submit that application to the state regulators, to the FDIC. And through that process, questions, issues that would normally arise, would be answered. And the cities and the county would be involved in that process. For us as an organization, we aren't necessarily mandated, but our plan was to make sure that the resources necessary to help us run the application process, meaning find a lawyer, we have one, to help us guide us through that process, that we would be paying for it. So we're not asking anything more of the cities and the county other than the promise to deliver that check on the day the charter actually happens. So the risk, as it were, to the municipalities, we believe, as Debbie said, it's a no-brainer. You write the check, you put it in an envelope, and you kind of hold on to that. And if we actually have a charter, that means we've jumped through every single hoop that any other bank, in the country has jumped through, and we've been dealt the approval to run this institution. And at that point, then we would have to make a deposit into the bank of that capitalization. So over the years, driving home the point that, discussing the public, first understanding the public bank and discussing with their constituents, that we would help guide that process, as the ones who are going to be responsible for running with this. And we've found supporters, but it's only gone so far. We've really not been able to, push them past, it's a great idea, but stage, with the exception of the city of Richmond, of course.
Thank you.
I'm Didicus Ramos. I'm also on the board of Friends. We should note what's happening in North Dakota, what has happened in the history of North Dakota, the only public bank in the country. We'll be slightly different than that, but I want to point out that even though they were established during the progressive movement of the 19-teens, they are now a very conservative state, but they would never give up their public bank. Interesting fact, because what they do is they bundle their loans through the public bank, and it goes through local community banks. So you don't go to the big Wall Street banks when you need financing for your small business. You go to your community bank. If they don't have the funds or ability to finance your loan, then they go to the Public Bank of North Dakota and say, this is how much the loan is, will you back it up? And the public bank says, yes, that's a good bet, we'll back you up on that, and the loan comes through the community bank. So everything is operating on a local level as opposed to a national level or a absentee business corporation level. That's the strongest point of it. Something interesting about North Dakota is that they didn't lose a bank in North Dakota since the public bank was instituted. So think of all the different ups and downs in the economy that they've gone through. North Dakota didn't suffer through any of that. Now, a fact, North Dakota, the population of North Dakota is smaller than the population of Alameda and Contra Costa County. So you have to take it with a bag of salt. But on the other hand, it did work, and it is working, and they are a model for what we want to achieve too. Does that help?
Yeah.
Thank you. So what is the vision for where deposits would come from for this bank? So North Dakota, if I understand correctly, has sort of a mandate that the state deposits its money with it. And given this is sort of coalition of municipalities, are you imagining a model like that, or deposits coming from another source?
Yeah, the assumption is that once we pass the capitalization threshold, outreach from the management team that will be behind the public bank, the management team that needs to be presented to the regulators. So the regulators need to know who's the CEO, do they have experience, who's the chief financial officer, and so on, who's the board members. All those people need to be vetted. But once that happens, that management team's responsibility is to, help ferret the application through, but as well, start hustling for deposits. Going to the city of Livermore, Pleasanton, and so on, and saying, the possibility is, instead of putting all your eggs into X bank, you might consider taking 10% of your funds and depositing into public bank. It would be another FDIC and state chartered institution, so it's a apples to apples comparison institutionally.
Yeah, two things about that. First of all, unlike the capitalization, deposits are market rate. So it's not hard to get deposits, right? Capitalization as a whole, we talked about that. But the deposits are market rate is a range. They probably wouldn't be the high end of market rate, but they would be market rate. And the other thing is the bank would certainly be able to take deposits, not just from governments, but from all the quasi-government entities like BART and the Water District. And very likely, as we read the law, also from the big NGOs. Sierra Club is centered in Oakland. Oakland is sort of the nonprofit center of the country. So I do not anticipate deposits being an issue. And the more deposits you have, a bank has, the more loans it can make, the more money it brings in, the quicker it grows, and the more good things happen in the community. So it's one of the big differences between deposits and capital is that deposits pay market rate returns.
So, can I just follow up? How is it that you're able, because I'm learning about this, how is it that you're able to offer market rate on deposits and also be taking on, say, riskier loans than a for-profit bank would, like, also be offering those goods for the public good?
First of all, that's a really good question. It's an important question. I would say a few things, and I'll try to be quick. One is that the big banks are extraordinarily conservative about who they loan to, and their definition of risk is, shall we say, skewed to a certain demographic as being unrisky. So that's one place where we can change it. Another is because all public bank loans are made through partnership institutions, it's shared risk, right? They're made through community banks or credit unions or CDFIs who are closer to their customers and know their customers. And the third is whether you get into the question, which I profoundly believe in, of reputational capital as a way to measure risk, not just how many dollars can these people show you that they can return to you, but how can they show you that they're embedded in their community and will thrive?
And one other thing is that, we have goals that are embedded, that we plan to have embedded in our charter, which are values. And we are trying to democratize finance. And because of that, our goal, unlike the Wall Street banks, is not to make $1 gazillion. We're okay with making a profit, a healthy profit, but it does not need to be $1 gazillion. And therefore, we are not as risk-phobic as they are, because all they care about are their shareholders and the bottom line, whereas our shareholders are the public that we serve.
Is anyone concerned about the structure of the bank as the bank board and will be actually governing the bank? The bank board, traditionally a bank board is the investors in the bank, and they sit on the board, and so they're watching their funds grow, and they're the ones that are saying, no, make loans that get huge returns. With this bank, the bank board consists of the political entities, the cities, whoever it is that's going to be sponsoring the bank. Right now, it's Berkeley, Richmond, Oakland, and hopefully Alameda County. Those four elements will be the political elements of the bank. They'll all have representation on the board, but the rest of the board will be people from the community who are experts in different fields like renewable energies, like affordable housing, like small business financing, and small business administration. So by keeping those people on the board, we hope to keep the bank, we intend to keep the bank responsive, not just responsible, but responsive to the needs of the community. That's how we will recycle the money from the loans back into the community, and that's the whole point. Keep it in a circular society, circular economy that comes back into the community, always strengthening the community as we go.
And maybe to follow up a question to the question of how the bank itself is going to provide market rate and returns, you also have to remember that it is, in some ways, the minimal capacity to have. You have the bank board and those that are responsible for running the bank itself, but there's not going to be an ATM. There's no retail operation at all, and its work is essentially continued education within the community of its existence and its work with local financial institutions. So you can imagine its cost structure is a fairly lean one comparative to an institution of similar size. So, in terms of the demands to return in order to continue a profit margin is less intense than similar size institutions as well. So sorry.
No, thank you. I guess I'm wondering, with the efforts going on in other cities in California around public bank, are there partnerships forging with Friends Public Bank of the East Bay in terms of efficiencies of strategy or ideas across different cities, or are you all working alone?
No, I mean, we're part of the California Public Bank Alliance, and there are monthly meetings. As a matter of fact, that alliance, began to do its work and was responsible for passing the AB 857 California Public Banking Act. So we're well aware of each other's existence and the efforts that they're making. But again, LA is different than Sacramento, is different from East Bay, is actually even different than San Francisco. So San Francisco has its own nascent public bank project. They've decided to go a different route, but still keeping an eye on turning it into a bank. But we are the ones who have actually reached the kind of the edge of the envelope. We ran into an issue that, frankly, one of our board members was the treasurer of Alameda County. And after a few years, he finally was able to understand enough of the work that we've done and the projection of how the bank would be helpful to the county. Then he wrote up a report and was ready to deliver that information to the Board of Supervisors with the information to them that he was ready to actually capitalize the bank by himself. And unfortunately, there were internal discussions at the county that indicated that where he wanted to draw the funds from, which are the funds that he's responsible for, that there was a question about how legal that is based on AB 857. We provided some legal grounding for why we believe it's a valid use of funds, but the local municipal lawyers said that they had their own opinion, and so that was one of the reasons. Finding funds from municipalities, for instance, ran into trouble.
Thank you. I'm curious about the organization being regional and sort of what the history of that as opposed to the individual cities. It sounds like there was some history where individual cities were making some headway, and then you grouped together as the East Bay region, so was that for size considerations or other considerations? And then I guess my part B is that once established, would entities that are capitalizing assume that their funds would be earmarked for their specific locale, or would it all be kind of in a pool? So I think my question is generally about the definition of region or local and how that might play out.
So, I mean, you know, with the understanding that, for instance, Alameda County would be, you know, one of the members of the capitalizing group, that provides a kind of cover for all the cities within, you know, within Alameda County, as you know, those who could tap into this resource of the public bank. Livermore, you know, at least at this juncture, is not been asked to capitalize the bank, but the assumption being that they may be a depositor into the bank, and then subsequently, because they're in Alameda County, would have access to funding. Now the question then of how the funds would be distributed, because not only is Alameda County, but the city of Oakland would be one of the capitalizing entities, and they would say, well, you know, Alameda County did it, but we put our own money in as well. So ostensibly, that's part of the work of the board of directors and those that are running the bank to manage that tension that exists, and there will be tension that exists on where the funds would go. Again, we're, you know, the work of the bank is something we can't restrain and, you know, dictate. They have to run them accordingly in order to manage the growth of the bank. So once the bank actually is established, the charter is what will drive how it's run, and of course our involvement as citizens in keeping their feet to the fire. But the question of, you know, $1 needs to go into this neighborhood, and $10 needs to go in this neighborhood, it's not something we can outline at this moment.
I'll add a little bit to that. First of all, your question about the history. Really, other than the county, Oakland is the only city in Alameda County that might conceivably have the funds to capitalize a public bank on its own. We did start with the Public Bank of Oakland. Anybody who knows Oakland knows what its financial situation is. And that became a non-starter fairly quickly. If Oakland were to turn around, that might make things different. And as far as your very cogent question about, let's say that this ballot measure passes and the vast bulk of funds come from the city of Berkeley. That's going to affect two things. It's going to affect how many city of Berkeley people are represented on the board, because the representation is very likely to relate to the money. And it's also going to affect the power the city of Berkeley has. I don't think it would make a totally every single investment was in Berkeley, but I think if Berkeley gave 90% of the money, you would probably see Berkeley getting at very least, say, 80% of the loans. It's the way the world works, and the way, in my opinion, the world should work. If Berkeley people are putting in the money, Berkeley should see the goals. If Richmond were to find the money from the settlement to make a major capitalization of the bank, that would affect strongly how much investment happened in Richmond. But it's not going to be, as George said, $1 for one neighborhood. I think we might be about done.
Well, unless there's any other questions.
Happy to follow up with anyone in conversation afterwards, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Yes, feel free to reach out to any of us if you have questions.
And please take food on.
Get your questions in.
And that's just a base but always profits. More profit driven.
In some ways, this is
Sure, yeah,
Right,
it's
so
just
it's
government,
exactly
but,
so
yeah, but it seems like the pitch to like, the pitch to the city is like, if you're getting market rate, it's like, well, but you're gonna have economic. Is that something you've got to do projections? Yeah, to have like clear, like,